Hello, my name is Ben.
And my name is Christian. How's it going?
Welcome to the Too Vague Podcast. One word, two hosts, stories, trivia, and video games. I've got Christian with me, as he just said. How are you doing, Christian?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you doing, Ben?
I am moderately neato. That's how I am.
Moderately neato. Where does that fit on the scale?
It's up to you. It's something I say to gauge what the other person is feeling because they got to think about moderately neato. Some people say, oh, I'm sorry. And some people say, that's great. So, it usually tells me what their mood is.
I'm doing actively supremo. Why not? I'm going to join in on the fun.
That's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. What's been going on in Imaginary Game Studios? Like SpaghettiOs, except tastier. Studios.
I hope so. If we ever get a review on one of our games that the game is less tasty than SpaghettiOs, then I'm dissolving the company right then and there. I don't think my ego could handle it.
Not a fan of the SpaghettiOs back in the day. I remember as a kid they were delicious, but having them now just doesn't seem very tasty at all.
It sounds like a nightmare now, but when I was growing up, I won't say that I was ever the largest kid in the room, but I was definitely never the skinniest kid in the room.
Yeah.
So my breakfasts often consisted of Stouffer's microwavable pizzas.
Okay.
And Morningstar Griller's Prime veggie burgers.
Okay.
Had no concern about the health components of eating a vegetarian burger versus a meat burger. It was just convenient and fast to stick a frozen patty in the microwave for 20 seconds and slap some cheese and ketchup on there and call it a breakfast.
Was this when you were young, or was this like when you were college?
We'll go middle school, high school era.
Okay, because that's very latchkey kid. I mean, that's kind of my generation. We would get home, we would feed ourselves, we'd do whatever, make our own lunch. I would come home from high school and have 6 slices of whole wheat bread and milk. that'd be what I would eat. Like a weirdo.
Protein and carbs. That's
I guess that works.
Most of the way towards a balanced meal. I wasn't a Chef Boyardee kid, that's for sure. We had the candies back in the day, like the Gushers.
Oh, yeah.
In my high school days, you brought Gushers to your middle school lunchroom, and you were the most popular kid in school. The fruit rollups, oh man, that was like a 12-pack of cigarettes and prison money, but we're talking 6th graders here.
Prison rollups. That's what they are. Make some toilet wine and some prison roll-ups, and you'll be the most popular kid in school. Maybe not the toilet wine. Maybe some other kind of thing.
Some Baby Duck Winery.
Exactly.
There's a movie reference for you, if anybody gets that.
Let's get into what you've been up to recently. So you've been working on Rogue Climber, I'm guessing.
Rogue Climber. Yes, indeed. I'm wearing, you can't see it because this is an auditory format, but you can use your imagination to see me wearing the Rogue Climber t-shirt that I currently have equipped to my person. We are doing really great on Rogue Climber. This is starting to get to be like, if game development is a big hump, then we are towards the peak of that hump right now.
Awesome.
We're about a week out from releasing the public demo. What is Rogue Climber, you ask? It's an action platformer roguelike extravaganza with elements from rage games like Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy and Only Up, progression a la Vampire Survivors, and parkour like Mirror's Edge and Neon White. If any of that sounds exciting to you, check out Rogue Climber on Steam.
Wow.
How's my announcer voice? Am I doing a good job?
That's very good. I couldn't have done it better myself, I don't think. Yeah, that's great. I remember I played it at PAX. Are you guys going to be going to PAX again this year or no?
We definitely want to show up to PAX again this year. We're also looking at doing Gamescom.
Oh, okay.
Which I'm not nearly as familiar with.
Right.
But Gamescom looks exciting to us because it happens around the time we're looking to do final release. We don't have a concrete date for that yet, but it would be really cool to be able to do some kind of physical event alongside our release.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Tokyo Game Show, which we have participated in some way or another the past couple of years. We did Meticulous 2 years ago, which Meticulous is Imaginary Game Studios' first release. It's a gamified health companion that helps you automate your diet and fitness planning. Then last year, we did Rogue Climber through them. Cool thing about Tokyo Game Show, I understand that probably for anybody listening to this, Tokyo's a long ways away. It's a bit of a flight.
Oh, yeah.
And also a bit of a price tag, especially in $20-25, which is something we're dealing with right now too, and trying to figure out which of these events to go to. But Tokyo Game Show also has a VR version of it. It's super cool. I can't believe more people don't know about this or don't talk about it. You can, quote unquote, attend Tokyo Game Show virtually, either through your computer or through your phone. They make both a phone app and a desktop app.
Okay.
Totally free. And if you have a VR headset, you can join with a VR headset too. You get to go to a virtual, like they make a video game, the Tokyo Game Show video game, where you go to this space and they have like these 3 or 4 different islands, and you can see all these booths that companies set up with trailers and figures, and there's like little achievements, so it's almost like its own little game, and you go collect like equipment for your guy, and you can talk to other people that are around you. Super cool.
Are there any waiting lines or?
There's the download and install. The download and install is always a little bit larger than I expect it to be, but otherwise you just kind of load into the space, and you can walk around and talk to people. It was really fun.
I was kind of joking about that. The lines, and then also all these things at the show that, like, you got to race from one exhibit to another exhibit because you have some sort of a schedule to keep or whatever.
We actually did go to the physical event at Tokyo Game Show last year. We didn't host a booth there. We were walking around seeing the show.
You and your girlfriend?
Yes. It's 4 days long. The first 2 days are business days, which are the correct 2 days to attend. Then you actually get to kind of walk around. You get to play some of the demos. You might actually get to talk to some of the people that work at the booths, and it's not too bad.
That's as a person who is displaying their stuff? Yes?
Not necessarily. So the business days are just for people who have some kind of industry connection. So like if you wanted to go, I'm sure you could get in on the business day as a media person, and they would give you a media badge.
Maybe I should do that one year. Just go, you know what? I'm going to go to Tokyo this year. Yeah, I think.
Why not? I mean, there's a million reasons to go to Japan, and if we wanted to, we could turn this into an 8-hour podcast of me gushing about why Japan is awesome. But I'll restrain myself.
We can do another whole episode on Japan if you wanted to, or Tokyo or whatever.
Do those qualify? Do you allow proper nouns?
I do.
Okay, good to know.
We actually did Italy with Andrew when he went. It was his first time ever in Italy, and we did a 2-parter. It was cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Talking about the Fiats and all the crazy stuff that he saw there.
The cars over in Japan are also very different. First 2 days are business days, and it's lovely because you get to go around and experience things. The next 2 days are public days, and that's when they're going to make you wait for hours out in the rain just to get into the place. And then once you get in there, it's shoulder to shoulder. Thankfully, being an American, I'm taller than the average Japanese person, so I can just see over all of the crowds and it's fine. If you're on the shorter side, you might have a little bit of a harder time finding your way around the place. And then you absolutely got to pick one demo that you absolutely want to see, and then you book it for that one, and that's going to be the one that you get to see while you're there.
Oh, wow.
It's crazy.
Well, it sounds like not going on the public days would probably be the best thing to do.
If you can squeeze in some kind of industry connection, then it's a lot more fun, I think. Unless if you enjoy going to events where there's 8 gajillion other people packed into a tiny spot, and you like being a part of that kind of event.
Nope.
Then good on you, but I'm with you. No, thank you.
I'm getting better with my social anxiety at PAX, but that would just be a little too much.
Yeah, it's nothing like PAX. PAX is way more relaxed.
Is it too late for me to make my suggestion for Rogue Climber?
Of course not.
You need a level that's Scottish themed called Brogue Climber. I said that to Eric. You know, I was like, should I bring this up on the show? And he goes, I'll be angry if you don't bring it up on the show.
Are you telling me that you talked to Eric about this, one of my compatriots, all the way back then, and he hasn't mentioned it to me until just now?
I told him not to.
Okay. I was gonna say.
And then he responded by saying, we could even include a secret level called Edinburgh. So there we go.
We do have the option to include special level names. So one of the core features of Rogue Climber is that all of the levels are procedurally generated, and you have the option to put in your own custom seeds. So if you wanted to, you could play the Ben level and see what is generated as a result of that. But we are sprinkling in some secret level names that will have some special generation criteria associated with them.
Oh, interesting.
I can't promise that we're going to have the bandwidth to create a fully Scottish-themed level for Edinburgh, but I do love the mood there.
There's haggis flying around and kilts.
Put all the gobos into kilts. I like that.
I have found a fun little hobby that maybe I'll start doing more of this. I did a Lego. They have botanicals, and I built a Lego orchid, and it was so much fun that I want to start doing more of these. It's not like I'm creating anything. I'm just following the plan kind of deal, but it's relaxing. It's like people who do puzzles.
It's interesting because they have Lego stores over in Japan, and the branding on Legos is different over there than it is here.
Okay.
I think a lot of the sets are the same. I mean, obviously, I think they have some special, like, Japan location ones that you probably don't find at your local Best Buy in the suburbs here. But they brand them as being Legos for adults. And I don't think they call it that here. They still have, like, the Legos with the black boxes that are, like, for more mature audience. Like, it's not Batman or whatever. But it's cool how much of that there is. Like, clearly it's very popular because they put that at the front of a lot of the Lego stores over there.
Yeah, it's a little expensive, but as far as relaxation, and honestly, it's a nice little plant made of Legos. It's easier to take care of than actual orchids. So we'll go with that. I'm so old that the spaceships were brand new. They only had two things. They had spaceships. And what was the other thing that they had? I don't know, fantasy, knights and stuff. Those were the crazy ones that they had back in the day.
When I was growing up, I never liked the play sets. Like when you go into the Lego store now, that seems to be the only thing they sell. They push these things hard.
Yeah.
And they have different like series and stuff. So like you could get differently shaped or different art styles of Legos, but it's still all kits and play sets.
Right.
But when I was a kid, I would just go and get, I mean, I wouldn't. My parents would. I was a little kid. They would be these big blue Tupperware boxes with like these cardboard lids.
Mm-hmm.
And it would just be tons and tons of blocks with no kits, no directions, no nothing. You just dump them all out onto the floor and put together whatever you felt like making at the time, which a lot of the time ended up being mechs or weird houses. But it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and back in my day, it was Lincoln Logs.
Oh, I had those too. I had Lincoln Logs, and I had what were they called? I want to say Tinker Tots or Tinker Toys.
Tinker Toys. They were like discs, and they had little holes in them,
and the colored sticks that maybe were different lengths.
Right, exactly. People in our neighborhood had the big ones that were like life-size Tinker Toys.
Oh, that's great.
We could probably also have a full episode just talking about toys of our youth, too. Really quick, the game that I've been playing, I saw someone review this new game. It looks pretty amazing. If you like Final Fantasy old school JRPG style games, it's called Claire Obscura Expedition 33. It just came out, and the story is just, talk about imagination. The whole premise is there's this witch or godlike being, and every year she will paint a number on the mountain. And she's called the Paintress. Everyone that age and older dies. Just they disappear. So every year, another expedition goes to try and defeat the Paintress. Every year, people die younger and younger, they just disappear. It's like a festival kind of thing. You are going on this expedition because your character, Gustav, lost someone that they cared about in this thing, but then also they've got some sort of new technology that they're going to use to hopefully defeat the Paintress. It is very classic feeling, beautiful looking, only $50 too. Not like your $70 games nowadays.
Don't you mean $90 games?
Well, yeah, right.
Subscription fees, online service, Game Pass.
I've been enjoying myself playing that.
You've sold me on it a lot better than Xbox has, because I swear I've heard the name Claire Obscura for like at least a year now, and passing from like Xbox Developer Direct or any of those kinds of events. And I still have had no idea. I didn't even know it was a RPG.
It's a FRPG.
A French RPG? Am I close?
You are absolutely correct. It was a French studio. It's 2 languages that they offer, French and English, and that's it. All the others are subtitles and the localizations, but they don't do the voice acting.
Interesting.
The English voice acting is pretty darn good. The story experience, from what I've read, is 30 hours. So it's not excessively long. Some people like to play and like their stories that long, but this is a shorter experience, so that's probably why the price is reflective of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's got enough variety so far. My only complaint is no map. I'd like to explore and then look at the map. Maybe it's because when I drove out to Arizona, I didn't have a phone. It was a map. It was actually an atlas.
You had a big globe in your back seat that you just had to like turn around over your shoulders, keep spinning it.
Yeah, that would be pretty funny, but no. That's my recommendation so far. I'm only about 5 hours into it. If you like that kind of old school Final Fantasy games, at the very least inspired by and liking it so far. So let's get into the word. Dramatic pause. Imagination. So let's do the definition, shall we?
Hit me with it.
Prepare yourself to be hit.
Ow. You don't have to do it so hard.
Sorry, dude. Imagination, noun, the faculty or action of forming new ideas or images or concepts of external objects not present to the senses. Some examples they give: the ability of the mind to be creative or resourceful. Also, the part of the mind that imagines. Thanks.
I've done some research on this myself. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
The word imagination, it comes from the Latin imaginatio, which means roughly to picture oneself. And in medieval times, scholars believed that the imagination was this powerful mental force that was actually capable of influencing the natural world, which led to alchemists exploring the potential for its divine power in the creation process.
Okay.
And then by the time you get to the Renaissance, thinkers were speculating that imagination wasn't just a human faculty, but some kind of gift from the divine, which is especially interesting considering that, how many thinkers back then were atheists. So, there's a whole conspiracy side of thinking like, oh, are they talking about aliens? Ooh. And then that leads us into the Victorian era, in which an inventor claimed to have created this steam-powered Imaginarium device that could project your inner thoughts into the outer world. But reportedly, the device exploded after somebody had imagined a dragon. And the fascinating thing about all of this is that I made it all up, and that's really just the power of imagination.
The first part was correct. Imaginatio.
I think the Latin origin is probably about where that story stopped being honest.
To picture oneself, that was correct. But then after that, it was all... Here's a question. Visualization is part of imagination, is it not?
I mean, that's interesting, because then are you going to suggest that somebody who is blind or otherwise deprived of sight is incapable of imagination? Because I would probably say no.
Imagination in those cases would be of the senses, right? So it would be something that you would picture where you are or visualize with your senses.
I do think that we typically have an over-reliance on vision as our primary sense of understanding the world around us, which is something that I have been butting heads with as I try to expand my creative tool set and dig further into learning music production skills and art skills, where we have lots of words to talk about visual stuff, and we don't have nearly as many words to talk about audio stuff. So communicating ideas musically is, at least for me, a lot more difficult to understand and explain when we don't have as many words to talk about sound as we do to talk about our sight. And
even less to talk about smell.
And yes, which thankfully one of my pandemic hobbies was cooking. So my smell and taste game is on point after having learned how to cook a lot of healthy food between pandemic times and putting Meticulous together.
But as far as imagination, do you imagine the other senses?
I certainly think so. I mean, if you're going to, and again, maybe this is just me speaking as somebody who comes from a creative profession, but if I'm going to cook a meal, I will imagine what I want it to taste like, what I want it to look like, what I want it to smell like when I'm thinking about how I want to put that dish together, especially if I'm going to be cooking for other people. If I'm cooking for myself, maybe presentation goes a little bit by the wayside. I don't typically cook with recipes. I've gotten to the point where I have a general understanding of my spice rack and of the sauces that I've got in my fridge and how I want to combine them together.
Yeah.
And based on the ingredients that I put in to my meal, I can choose to balance the flavors accordingly. So like I make a lot of stir fries. My typical go-to stir fry sauce is equal parts soy sauce, sake, and mirin. From there, I can decide, do I want it to be a little bit more sour? And then I can put in some su or some rice vinegar. Or do I want it to be a little bit spicier? And then if I want it to be spicier, do I want to go the Ryu, the chili oil route, or the more American Tabasco hot sauce kind of thing?
Right.
How sweet do I want it to be? Do I want to sweeten it with sugar or honey? But then depending on the types of vegetables that I want to put into my stir fry, that can affect how I want to put the different spices in there.
There's flavor profiles that can be overpowered by other flavors, right?
Right. But again, it's harder to use words to talk about food to me than it is to talk about the way I can present the food on a plate. Like I can talk about how a food looks better than I can talk about how a food smells outside of our basic sweet, sour, savory, umami.
Pungent.
But it's a pungent aroma. I probably don't want my food to be described as pungent.
No?
That's usually not a good sign. If somebody's going to break out the pungent, I feel like I've probably made a mistake somewhere along the line.
Well, smells like rotting flesh. No, that's not good either. Are you a mixologist?
Interesting question. I do not drink, but I do cook a lot with liquor. But my girlfriend, family, they drink, so I will make drinks for other people. But I have to ask them how it tastes because I don't drink it.
Gotcha. What do you think would be in a drink called Sex on a Bus?
Oh, God. Clearly, we're in banana land here, which I will say, as a child, one of my favorite beverages. I've been on business trips with family into the Caribbean, to the British Virgin Isles, and the Bahamas in the past. And sometimes you stay at the hotels and they got like bars out by the pool or whatever.
Right.
I was a little kid, so I don't drink, but my parents, they would order me a virgin banana daiquiri. I do have fondness for banana drinks.
Okay. And that was related to a bus? Not to sex, though.
If you're gonna... Well, what goes in a sex on a beach here? Because I got to look that up now.
Sex on a bus, to me, is this. Kahlua, whiskey, splash of orange juice, cocktail sausage as a garnish. That's what I'm thinking. But what's in a sex on a beach?
And I'm looking at it here. It's vodka, peach schnapps, orange slices or juice, cranberry juice, and, of course, your maraschino cherries. So if you wanted to get technical on it, and you're doing a variation on that instead of sex on the beach, you take the tropical out of it. So you might take the oranges out of there.
Okay.
I don't know how you incorporate banana into a drink. Obviously, there's got to be a banana liqueur, right? So you get some of that banana liqueur in there instead of the orange juice. Peach schnapps. I don't know. I love peach in general, so I would feel bad taking the peach schnapps out of there.
So you're not thinking public transit with this beverage. You're not thinking. Okay.
I mean, I'm not gonna put like a used condom in my drink that I'm gonna serve to my family.
That's why the cocktail sausage. That's the sex part of the sex on a bus.
Oh, okay. I thought that was the bus part. You must have cleaner buses than our town does.
Oh, no. The bus, it's public transit, so you got to have your coffee, hence the Kahlua, which is the coffee liqueur, right?
Okay. You're thinking bus getting up early in the morning?
Yep,
sure.
That's the splash of orange juice. And then there's a lot of drunk homeless people on the bus, so there's where the whiskey is, but I don't know if they're having sex. That's my imagination at work right there. What is the first thing you think of when you think of the word imagination?
Obviously, imagination is an important word to me. I started Game Dev Studio, and I called it Imaginary Game Studios. It goes back a ways for me. It goes to a few different places. First, when I used to play Pretend as a small child, I would always refer to that as the imagination game. And even locally, there was a playground not too far from me called the Imagination Station.
Okay.
That we would go and play on that all the time. So for me, imagination is 110% perfectly distilled childlike innocence, and it makes me feel all happy and warm inside.
Very cool.
Growing up, obviously, I'm a game guy, so I would go to the game store and I would look at the boxes of video games to choose which video game I wanted to beg my parents for. And anytime you stick the word imagination, create, build, design, that was like catnip for me. Like, man, I'm going to have an opportunity to express myself creatively in this video game. Heck yeah, get me in there.
Yeah.
Because video games have the interactive element, that the art of a video game is dependent on the interaction between the game and the player. And what you bring as a player to a game is your imagination. And that's what you're imposing upon this artistic work to create something totally unique to you.
When you say imagine, build, create, all those things, I think sandbox types of environment.
Sure. Sandbox games, I want to say, are relatively new, depending on your definition of a sandbox game. So, like, when you say sandbox, the first game that comes to my mind is Kenshi. It plays like an ARPG, I guess, sort of. It's top-down.
Yeah, I think Kenshi is one that my friend Cheyenne, they mentioned it on the Failure Show.
I think you're on the right game, because there's a lot of failure in Kenshi. Kenshi is easily one of my top 10 games of all time. So if they didn't recommend it enough, allow me to second it. Go check it out. Super awesome game. If Morrowind is my go-to open-world RPG, Kenshi is my go-to sandbox game. And you did have more, I guess, sandboxy experiences back in early console days with, like, The Sims, maybe. But as far as, like, what games would have those words on the back, two come to my mind. Games like Lego Island, like the Lego games would have that on there. Or, like, games with level editors, so, like, Time Splitters. Getting to make levels in Time Splitters was so much fun, and I spent so much more time in that than actually playing any other part of the game.
I remember this thing that I had on my Commodore 64 that was a fireworks creator that I think Activision put out. And it was kind of this thing where you would make your own fireworks show, and then you could save it on a disc and give it to someone to put in their computer, and they could play this fireworks show.
Oh my gosh. That's kind of awesome, though. Activision made that? This has to be pre-Call of Duty Xbox Live days, obviously.
Oh gosh, yeah. Computer Fireworks Celebration Kit. That was.
Oh my gosh, I have to look this up. Computer Fireworks Celebration Kit?
Yes.
Like, Google is not even recommending this as an autofill answer. That's how back in the day we're going here with this. 1985.
Commodore 64.
This looks just like Missile Command to me.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what it was. It was like reverse Missile Command. You could put different theme music to them. Once you made your fireworks display, you could give it to someone and they could play their fireworks.
The number one rule in all of video games is you give players the tools to make things. And the first thing that they're going to do is, do you know the answer here?
No.
They're going to draw a penis. So can you draw penises in Computer Fireworks Celebration Kit?
You know what?
Circa 1985.
Quite honestly, that was when that was just before I was a freshman.
So this had to be peak immature humor time for you then.
Honestly, I never, ever drew a penis when I was that age. Never. The thought never crossed my mind. I don't remember anyone doing any penises. I don't remember any of that stuff in my grade school or high school at all. So, yeah, it's weird.
You know, they say there's two types of people in the world. There's people who drew penises in their notebooks, and then there's liars. So, you know, I'm just saying.
Okay. It might be a generational thing. I don't know, because I did draw some stuff in notebooks, but it was like flip book stuff. But anyway, when you were talking about creative games, that's what came to mind, was that Computer Fireworks Celebration Kit.
This is kind of awesome. I can't believe they were making shareable video game experiences all the way back on the Commodore 64.
Activision, they were the cutting edge. They were the company that was doing the interesting, unique stuff. Atari was just kind of like, well, what does everyone want?
They were the company? Are you going to suggest to me, are you going to have the gall to suggest to me that putting Jay and Silent Bob into Call of Duty 37 isn't the most creatively rewarding thing you've ever seen?
I decline to answer that question. based on the fact that Jay and Silent Bob may be on my show at some point. I don't know. They won't. They probably wouldn't.
I mean, hey, it's awesome. I laughed quite a bit when I saw that, but I wouldn't call it cutting edge. I'll leave it at that.
When it comes to video games and it comes to massively multiplayer or, those types of games, there are creative strategies that you can come up with. But I mean, at a certain point, you've figured out all the strategies. Creativity is coming up with strategies.
I would agree with you 100%. Now, obviously, we live in a very different world now. And one of the most popular words in gaming nomenclature is the meta. People talk about meta when it comes to any kind of game. It's not even just, it started maybe in the context of games like League of Legends, where the meta was who are the popular characters that people like to pick, so that you can then plan to pick around that or pick counters to the popular characters and then see success that way. Mm-hmm. But now there's meta in every game, because as soon as a video game is released, the entire internet descends upon it, and you're able to figure out the optimal dominant strategies in very short amounts of time with immense man hours behind the reasoning of it. One of my love-hate relationship games is Path of Exile. It's a game that's very driven by the meta. You've got the biggest talent tree in any video game ever, and people on the internet have figured out the best possible ways to distribute your points and the best possible items to equip to your character so that you can deal untold amounts of damage. And what happens is now the game gets balanced around that meta. So me, as like a guy, I could spend my whole lifetime playing Path of Exile, and I would still not have a fraction of the man hours used to optimize the best of the best builds, which ultimately translates to, if you don't look up what other people have built, then you will never, ever, ever see the final boss in that video game, which is kind of sad to me, because I don't enjoy playing somebody else's video game experience. I like to experiment. To me, that is the act of playing the game, exercising my imagination and trying to figure out, like, oh, okay, so fire is technically a damage over time effect, and then this pair of boots turns active damage over time effects into speed, and then this skill turns movement speed into damage, so I can light the whole screen on fire and then do a dash and kill everybody, and whoa, that's super cool, let me try that. And then, oh, well, it's not something the internet figured out, so it's never going to work, and I just wasted 40 hours of my life to level up a character who never had any potential, and now I'm sad. So that, to me, is the dark side of modern imagination in games.
If you're talking about the earliest days of consoles, there wasn't those types of games.
No.
But there were things that were fighting arcade games that people tried to figure out all the moves, and you didn't know all the moves to all your different characters. It was passed on in a very community-based way.
Yeah, I mean, and at least like being a kid in an arcade, right? Like anything that you learn is going to be word of mouth, and it's still going to be relatively local in scope.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's all of humanity is the scope by which strategies are defined. I'm a big card game guy. I've spent way too many hours playing like Hearthstone. The best time to play any card game is 3 days after a new expansion comes out, because nobody has figured out the meta decks. And like after that 3-day window, everybody immediately starts piling on the best strategies. So either you lose because you're not using the best strategy, or you specifically have to build a deck that is trying to counter the best strategies instead of exploring all of the possible options out there, which to me is a much less compelling experience. I know a lot of people like it. I'm not going to begrudge them for liking it, but it's not what I play for.
That's interesting, because I had a discussion on a previous show with this gentleman, Doug, who made this game called Roast, which is a game about making s'mores, essentially. But it's one of those Uno-ish, screw over your neighbor fun kind of games. We were talking about the same thing, because he was mentioning the Magic the Gathering problem. People micromanage their deck to a point where they know exactly what the outcome will be. If they don't beat you within 3 moves, then they've lost.
You've played through every single possible permutation of ordering of cards in your deck versus ordering cards in your opponent's deck. And then at that point, you're basically just reading out a math formula to each other and seeing what happens. It's like pachinko at that point, where you just dropped a ball at the top of the machine, watched it bounce off pegs, and it lands in one of the holes.
It's not fun.
Not for me.
Not for me either. Part of the thing that I enjoy is me against the game. I mean, I would rather play against a game than me against a person.
I like playing against a person, but in the context of what I'm able to do versus what that person's able to do, not playing against the whole of the internet.
Yeah. So you said imagination was very important to you growing up, video games, I guess, and otherwise, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I think of as a movie, did you ever have an imaginary friend at all? If you don't want to answer, don't answer. That's fine. But
I had an overactive imagination, so I can't say that I had any one imaginary friend. It might have been whatever I was in the mood for at the time.
I never had, not to my recollection, imaginary friends. It was just I would do things myself. I would do creative things, or I would go out and maybe play with someone, but I didn't have a visualization of what this person was. You know, that they were an imaginary friend.
Yeah, I would play pretend with a friend of mine all the time, and it would be all sorts of stuff, whether it's Pokemon stuff, Star Wars-y type stuff, playing your own fantasy RPG, Morrowind-y type stuff, whatever it was, whatever you're in the mood for.
Because one of the things I think of is the movie Drop Dead Fred. Did you ever see that movie?
Oh, I think you mentioned it to me before, and I've seen trailers of it as a result of that, but I have not actually seen the movie.
It's a movie that came out in 1991. Phoebe Cates is moving back home because she had some rough things go on, a fiance, and she's getting her life back together. She goes home, visits, and she finds this Jack-in-the-Box, but it's like taped shut because it's got her imaginary friend from when she was a little kid, and he would cause all these problems that she would get blamed for, and she would say, it's my imaginary friend. Well, now it's the imaginary friend when she's in her 20s, and the whole premise is your imaginary friend comes back while you're an adult. What happens? What does your imaginary friend do now that you're an adult? It's like she's going on a date with someone, and he's providing commentary as she's on this date, distracting her and all this. It's a funny movie.
I really miss fun premises in movies and stories like that.
Yeah.
It's like a big thing in movie discussions about the best performing movies are all remakes and sequels. This year it's all Minecraft, Captain America, and Snow White. And then all the original movies come out and they flop. And I'm sitting over here thinking, I want to support original movies. I want to see original movies, but they don't make a movie where I hear the premise and I go, oh, that sounds like fun. I feel like it's been ages since I've experienced that.
I think also there are a lot of movies that don't get their traction until far after.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There are movies that weren't successful. Popular movies aren't necessarily the great movies. You know what I mean? Just because they're popular doesn't mean they're great.
Yeah.
There will be movies and games and other creative things that won't connect with you at a certain time, but will connect with you later if you're open to that.
Sure.
There are things where, it's just not the right time for that thing to come out. Like James Bond. Timothy Dalton's James Bond was dark well before Daniel Craig's dark Bond, and everyone liked that. No one liked Timothy Dalton's Bond because he was coming off the heels of... Anyway, this is not fun.
Hey, I used to be a big fan of James Bond until Live and Let Die came out, or whatever the heck the latest one was. No Time to Die, sorry.
Live and Let Die is a Roger Moore.
That's a good one. Go watch that one instead. Don't watch No Time to Die.
Yeah, I think the peak of the Daniel Craigs was probably Skyfall. I mean, I enjoyed Skyfall.
See, Skyfall is a great movie, and I hold that it's a terrible James Bond movie. It's a really good movie. It's a really entertaining movie.
But it's not a James Bond movie.
No. Guy with shotgun, trying to defend a house in the countryside with his groundskeeper and trying to protect his top secret grandma. That's not what I come to a James Bond movie for. And they know that.
I didn't even think about that. You were absolutely right. It's got that little bit between him and Q. It's like, what are you expecting? Blah, 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 this thing. And they tried to pay the homage with James Bond's car that they drive out to the...
Is it an Aston Martin?
Yeah. There's a joke about the ejector seat. But it's not a James Bond movie. It doesn't feel... It feels more like it could be a different movie.
It didn't have to be James Bond. It could have just been secret agent man,
Exactly.
and then you get to No Time to Die. Ugh. Ugh.
Tomorrow, forever, finger. I don't know, whatever.
Tomorrow, forever, finger. I want to see that James Bond movie.
So, let's talk about video games.
Sure.
I've got crazy ideas. I shouldn't sell it one way or another, right? I should just tell you my ideas.
I mean, every idea is a crazy idea until you make it and prove how awesome it is. So let's hear it.
One of my very first game ideas was around the time Psychonauts came out, and I played and loved Psychonauts. And then also, before that, Tim Schafer with LucasArts, Grim Fandango was also, was that kind of point and click kind of adventure. But
I did miss out on those personally, but I was a big fan of Brutal Legend back in the day.
Oh, yeah. That had, like, by far the best soundtrack. I mean, just...
Oh, of course. By definition.
Span the spectrum of all the different genres within the genre of metal.
Yeah.
It was really pretty great. I enjoyed the game itself, too, even though, it was at its core a tower defense game that Electronic Arts didn't want to call a tower defense game. I had this idea about a mime world and a real world, and there was a detective exchange because some sort of murder or crime had occurred in one of the worlds and the person crossed over into the other world. So there's all sorts of stuff that you could write in there, like a Stitch in Time saves mimes. There's a joke to be made about white privilege, I think, too. At the time, the thought was your different characters would have different experiences in the world, and that would be an interesting way to find the mechanics. I also thought the first person ... would be pretty funny.
My first reaction is there's definitely some Who Framed Roger Rabbit in here.
Yeah.
You've got your detective going into the Toon world and trying to explore this universe that doesn't abide by the same rules as ours does, which clearly they've proved that that's a really fun idea. So yeah. I'm not going to hate on that. Second reaction, I'm a huge sucker for noir detective in general. Like The Black Dahlia is got to be one of my top favorite novels of all time, and I even really like the movie with Josh Hartnett and Scarlett. Obviously, L.A. Noire is a pretty great game. I don't know, do people like L.A. Noire? Do you know L.A. Noire? Have you played it?
Yes, I do know it. It wasn't for me. My friend Chris really enjoyed it. You know what I look at as a noir that I don't think people do? Big Lebowski is kind of, to me, a noir feeling movie, because you've got this guy who gets pulled into this situation and he's got to figure out exactly what's going on.
It's not a detective movie for sure. I mean, it's a mystery thriller. I would never think to call it a noir movie, but now that you say that, it has like that same energy to it. I mean, I think one of the things that I like about noir is it has this confidence to its storytelling where it doesn't have this need to feel like it needs to keep pushing you to the next story beat. It's comfortable with just letting you sit and breathe in a moment,
stew,
and enjoy a world and the characters in that world. And obviously The Big Lebowski is full of that. But building a mime world in a video game sounds like it would be a lot of fun, just visually, because you can do so much with black and white in terms of the art style and the technology that you use to build the assets. And now that I have to also play the role of businessman, just think about all the time that you would save on texturing if the whole world gets to be in black and white.
And this wasn't in the original design, but this is in my current thinking about it. Part of what makes things in the mime world less black and white is the mimes themselves will bring the color to whatever the thing is. So whatever they do...
Is that your narrative thrust? Is that like there are crime scenes and the crime scenes are like splattered with color and the mimes are all freaking out about this because there shouldn't be color in mime world?
That's a good idea. It was more like in the mime world, you had the color thing was in the action, like doing the thing or simulating the thing. And that's what brought the visual to life in the mime world. Whereas in the real world, they're using their imagination to do the things they need to do in a real world, like pulling the rope. There are a lot of imagination things that could go, I think, with either of those worlds. I was thinking initially just a sort of the exchange program idea where you'd have two different cops in two different worlds, investigating in two different ways.
A buddy cop movie where one of them is the mime.
Yeah.
That's what you got to do. You got to make the mime side like the washed up, he's seen it all kind of thing, and the spunky new guy is the regular world guy. You got to have it be that way. So like the new guy's trying to figure out what's going on in this like just beat up mime guy's head, but he's not getting it because obviously can't talk about it.
He's not as streetwise as the weathered old crotchety mime.
I do have one specific mime video game reference here that is important.
Okay.
You know, in video games, it's very common to have invisible walls where you can't go. In the Family Guy video game, wherever they put an invisible wall, there was always a mime creating the invisible wall with his hands to show you where you're not allowed to go, which is just way too clever for the Family Guy video game.
Did Seth MacFarlane have anything to do with the video game?
That's a good question. I don't know, because this was older, so this might have been a time where, like, early video games that actually got the real actors to do the voices in those early movie video games. This might have still been the time where they cared enough to actually get involved in those projects. Obviously, that would never happen today. Could have been. I don't know. It would have been right around the cutoff where they stopped caring.
The Family Guy comedy. It was not anything that I enjoyed. I never really appreciated his stuff until I saw the Orville television series. And for some reason, you could tell how much he loved and how much he was impacted by Star Trek.
Yeah.
Just by watching the whole series. It was pretty darn good for a sci-fi.
I liked the Orville well enough. My biggest problem with that, it was impossible to track because it kept switching which service it was going to be on. It was getting canceled, renewed, and I didn't know where to watch it anymore. So I don't know how much of it I saw. I don't know how much of it I missed, but I liked what I saw of it.
Yep. We no longer have to fear the banana. How about salads? A million ways to die in the West. I enjoyed that movie too.
I had fun with it.
But anyway, let's not talk about that. Let's talk about the last idea. This is a more recent one. I like side-scrolling beat-em-ups from the arcade days.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of those. So one of the things that I thought about was it's a combo sort of dating sim, side-scrolling beat-em-up where it's you go on dates and through the date you reveal your emotions and your fears and stuff. And that impacts the internal conflict portion of when you're doing the fighting. All those things manifest based on your interactions with whoever you're going on the date with.
Is the fight like my internal struggle? So like I'm beating up my first date anxieties?
Yes, exactly. You're kind of going through all these things in your head and it's kind of internal conflict about that is my thought.
Okay.
You probably can't identify with this because you've been happily dating for a while, right?
I have, but I am a socially awkward fellow, so I can absolutely relate on that level. But no, that seems, I can absolutely see, like, my first thing is that my brain goes to this as a DS game, where you've got the side-scrolling happening on one screen and the date playing out on a second screen.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. That would be interesting. Because you do the date part first, and then you go to the side-scroll and beat 'em up, and then you do another date, and then you go to the side-scroll and beat 'em up. The pacing on that would have to be just right.
I'm imagining, like, your date says, hey, go get me a coffee. And then your guy says, like, oh, yeah, sure. And then all of a sudden, a swarm of coffee-themed enemies starts pouring in from the side of the screen, as your character has this internal conflict of like, oh God, does she like cappuccinos or espressos? Does she like it ice or hot? Is it a large or a small? Oh, if I get her a large, is she going to think that she's fat? Or if I get her a small, is that calling her fat? I don't know. And
non-fat milk?
And beating up, maybe even like beating up the right enemies is you making the choice for the date. So like, you know, in a typical dating sim, it's more like a visual novel where you're given three choices. Do you pick A, B, or C? But maybe in this context, the enemy that you beat up first or the enemy that you deal the most damage to ends up being the choice that you make on the date. Or if you make the wrong choices, then the enemies get progressively stronger. So if you survive the level, that's considered a successful date. But if you keep making the wrong choices, the enemies get stronger and stronger until eventually you lose the date. There's something here.
Okay. So how many different dating things? You know what? Here's the other thing with dating is gender. I'm a man and I haven't dated someone in a very long time, but I can put myself in the shoes of when I used to date and how these different really horrible feelings would manifest. And I don't know if that is universal enough to make a game out of. Now that I think about it, it is universal to have bad dates, but the perspective can be different based on gender, based on age, based on a whole bunch of different things.
You're going to make a very different game if you have a male main character versus a female main character.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you can't do it. Like, obviously, the number one dating sim, if you can call it that comes to mind is Hunipop. That took the internet by storm when that came out, and that's basically a Bejeweled game, a match 3 game, where you play match 3 to go on dates with girls. But they didn't run into any problems with gender as far as I'm aware.
Okay.
Obviously, that came out a few years ago, which in internet culture times is a millennia ago. But just so long as you don't bring up current politics, then you're probably fine.
There's also ethnicity, and there's also world culture and backgrounds, families from other countries, and you'd have to limit the scope.
I don't think there's anything wrong with allowing that to be in the game. I mean, you look at like what Hunipop did, you look at what Stardew Valley does with their relationships and how they handle it. Stardew Valley is a farming game, and it's made by Concerned Ape, who, as far as I'm aware, that's his only game. I know he's like working on another game, but he made infinity money off of Stardew Valley, so he's just taken however much time he wants to make the next game. It's a game where you're in a little town, you're in a little village, and you can develop relationships with people in the village by giving them gifts and talking to them, and eventually you can get married.
It's where you hold the big turnip over your head.
There's definitely some of that in there, yeah. I think an interesting thing to think about with a game is how much are you trying to make a business product? In which case, you're going to ask the questions like, how do we capture the most universal experience? Is this going to speak to people? Versus, how are you creating a piece of art that other people can connect with that specifically comes from your experience in the world? Not to get too philosophical in here, one of my favorite pieces of writing of all time, Self-Reliance by Ralph Waldo Emerson. He's talking about how believing in your own private heart is true for all people. That is true genius. And I'm probably butchering the quote there. But being hesitant to express yourself through a game design based on it not lining up with other people's expectations, I think is not the right way to design a video game. There's no reason to be afraid of putting your perspective into any game, let alone a dating sim.
There is a narrative there as far as me telling a story about maybe my dating life or a dating life.
If you're specifically going to tell a literal story of a date that you went on, then that will be a little different than just drawing on dating experience to make a game about dating.
Yeah.
And there's nothing right or wrong about one or the other of those. Obviously, I won't be able to give feedback on interpreting your specific dating experience as much as I can about how to design a dating game.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that the game that would come out of either of those two conversations is any more or less valid than another. And for me personally, I am so much more interested in games that are made by a person who had an idea based on their experiences than I am playing a game that comes out of a company who's trying to tick all of the focus group checkboxes.
And you also bring up this idea about art and games. I don't want to piss all over people's art. That's my first thought when I review a game, because if someone put it out, they put it out for a reason, and maybe it was to make money. But maybe, I mean, to me, I just think it was a piece of art. Now, is that wrong because you're selling it?
I mean, obviously, I'm going to review something differently if it's coming from Ubisoft. I'm going to review Assassin's Creed 47 in a different way than I'm going to review Lisa the Painful. But there's a lot of different lenses that I like to look at games through. One is the intent behind the game, what they're trying to express, and then another is the technical aspect of it. So how well made is the game? How well put together is it? And reviewing a game on its technical merits is not a criticism of its artistic value in any way, I don't think. And reviewing a game based on my interaction with it and the entertainment value that I got out of it is not necessarily condemning the artistic value of it either.
Yeah.
So like one of my least favorite games of all time is, and I'm going to make a lot of enemies saying this, so before you listen to the next words, make sure to go to Rogue Climber on Steam and click the wishlist button. Great.
Shut off the podcast.
Now that you've done that, I hate Zelda Breath of the Wild.
Okay.
And the reason is because it was advertised to me as a game where you can start by fighting the final boss. I heard that and I was like, what? No frickin' way. Heck yeah, sign me up. So the first thing I did is I beeline straight for Hyrule Castle. You know, I picked up a few powerful weapons along the way, and then I spent hours trying to navigate through all of the sentries with their one-shot kill laser beams,
Right.
trying to get through the stupid ox bosses and all that nonsense, and eventually I make it to the boss, and I spend, I kid you not, 10 hours chucking bombs at the final boss of Zelda Breath of the Wild because the durability of my full equipment of high-level weapons was not enough to do more damage than like a boss and a half's health bar anyways.
Right.
So I'm just trying to cheese it over and over and over again, and it just does not work. So I eventually just have to put the game down, step away, and say, wow, this experience that I had with this game is one of the worst video game experiences I've ever had. And if it wasn't marketed to me as a game where you can go fight the final boss whenever you want to, and I just played it the way that it was intended to be played, get all the power-ups first, I probably would have had a much better time with it. And I know a lot of people really love them, and that's great for them. Personally, I hate it. Never want to play it again. I might give the sequel a chance at some point in the future one more time, but
I don't have a Nintendo, so I never had a chance to play it.
you're not going to get one anytime soon based on how quickly the pre-orders for the Switch 2 sold out.
Yes. I'm fine with my now old PlayStation 5, not the Pro or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's like, I just give me the one. I don't want to buy the one with the better chips in it. It's kind of getting away from what a console is. It's a standard. And when you start breaking that standard and saying, well, if you got this fancier machine, it looks better or it's smoother. And that means that the older machine is not the thing that you're designing it for. You're designing it for the new one and the new one alone.
I think in that sense, consoles have served a very important role in the game industry to make gaming not so pay to win.
No.
So it's not just like all the best games are sold at the highest prices for people who are able to get the dual graphics card TI of the latest release from NVIDIA.
Yeah, there's that too. Thank you for listening to my stupid ideas and discussing them with me.
Those are both fun, valid ideas, and I have to give you a lot of credit because they both sound like video games that I've not played before.
Yeah.
And I am so desperate to play video games that don't just sound like a million other video games that I've already played.
The marketing of a game is trying to associate it with something that's familiar because you're trying to sell, right?
It's a big part of it, especially on Steam, when the way that games are shown to people are based on tags, and the way that you get upvotes on social media is by saying, hey, look at this game that I am making that is like insert other game name here. Let me turn this back on you here for a second so that I can serve the title word of the discussion, imagination. If we wanted to get super philosophical, super meta on this word, you could go so far as to say, isn't all experience just imagined because our perceptions of the world around us are faulty? Reality is only what you believe it to be. But for me, video games have had some really important and meaningful experiences to me. Like some of my favorite games of all time are the character-focused, narratively driven RPGs. Like Persona 4 is really high on my list. I think, my go-to answer for a favorite game of all time has long been Mass Effect 2, just because I love how much depth there are to those characters and the relationships that you develop, and the way that you can explore in those games is so awesome. So are there any games that you feel like you've had meaningful experiences in them? And depending on who I'm asking, that either could sound incredibly obvious, like, of course I've had meaningful experiences in video games, or incredibly silly, like, what are you talking about? It's just a video game. Interpret the question however you will, but I am curious.
Arcade games were a big social development thing for me. So,
Sure.
my interactions with people were mostly at the arcade and school. But in arcades, there was more flexibility. It was more real. It wasn't like you were putting on this show for your teachers or, other students, or it was a place where you could be yourself.
You didn't have any adults in the area.
It was very formative for me in my love of games. The game Mystic Warriors was my first experience where it told a story. It's kind of a run and gun. You choose one of 5 ninjas, and it's a 4-player cabinet usually. So, you can play up to 4 players, but there's always one ninja out.
Mm-hmm.
And that ninja is abducted. And as a part of the story, you're trying to rescue your ninja buddy. There is a sequence where they sacrifice themselves to save you. And then once you beat the big guy at the end, you mourn the death of your fallen ninja friend. As far as emotional impact in an arcade game, that is the first time I ever really felt something from a game based on a story. The whole idea was very simple. And it randomizes, right? It's one of the 5 can be abducted. But 1, it's a fun game to play. And 2, the storytelling component was very impactful for me. It is one of the most meaningful experiences as far as a video game for me.
I think when people talk about video games as just being escapism or entertainment, it neglects to acknowledge that storytelling is, I think, a fundamental part of the human experience and who and what we are as social creatures.
Yeah.
And whether or not you're getting that storytelling from campfire stories or books or movies or video games or whatever, it can matter. And that all just comes from our ability to engage with the material.
Agreed. I would say that's probably my earliest games can be storytelling.
That's really cool, because I think not a lot of people would go to arcades for that.
And that's the thing, too. Back in 93, storytelling in an arcade just was not something that really happened too much. I could probably think of other ones that are more contemporary, but I think that was probably the most eye-opening.
You can tell a story in a video game? Oh
Exactly.
My gosh. Yeah.
And have it be fun, too. Do you have a final thought on the word imagination?
We've covered most of the points that I had at the top of mind.
Okay. Creativity is part of imagination, I would say.
Both of them come from a place of desire. You have to want something that you don't have as a fundamental motivation to imagine these things. So much of what I get out of playing video games and making video games is creating new experiences that I want to have and I want to be able to share with other people.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that drive in you, then you're probably not going to produce as many things that would be called creative or imaginative, which doesn't speak to your capacity for creativity or imagination.
I just never thought to get into the industry because I enjoy the product. You know what I mean? Getting into software is fine. Gaming software, different. Financial software, laboratory software, that's fine.
They say don't meet your heroes. So if your heroes is video games, there are reasons not to go meet them. As a game maker person, one of my favorite experiences is watching somebody play a game that I've made for the first time, because I really feel like that's one of the strongest windows I have into that person's imagination in the whole world, when you see the way that they explore this thing that you've created that they can interact with however they want. And that's super cool. That's like super rewarding.
Well, you've sold me on getting into video games.
Good. I can't wait to play
the mime detective dating sim side-scrolling beat-em-up games or whatever. Christian, thank you so much for being on the show.
This has been really great. I really appreciate you inviting me on here. If you're interested in Rogue Climber, make sure you go check it out on Steam and add it to your wish list. Those wish lists really make a huge difference to our ability to continue to be indie game maker people. I have to say those words.
Thank you, audience, for joining us on this week's episode of the Too Vague Podcast. My name is Ben.
My name's Christian.
And we've been your hosts. Have a wonderful night. Bye.
Bye.